Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ideological doctrine and ego in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Al, a filmmaker from the YouTube channel Inspire 369. His channel has 3 inspiring videos so far about the energy centers, the law of one, and the depths of the mind, such as the archetypes and Jungian psychology. The videos have a neat retro 80s style, and he puts complex concepts in a digestible way for people, which I quite like. Hi, Al. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
So, how did you end up setting up your channel, and why did you choose to do it the way you did?
Yeah, well, I'm a filmmaker by trade, and I've been studying the law of one for quite some time. I've been into esoteric topics and kind of fringe topics and ideas, and I felt like the law of one is very it's a very complex philosophical in some ways. So it's very, yeah, complex philosophy really, and there's always a lot of, if you first read it, I mean, you really have to read it a lot to really understand it. So I thought that I could use my skills as a filmmaker to kind of, help teach or at least help, distill down some of the concepts, at least, in a way that makes it a little bit easier to understand. And really, I did it, kind of as a way for me to really understand it better. And it just kind of, came out. I guess I started writing and trying to distill down some of these big ideas and understand it myself. And I realized that this is something that, I could probably do an animation or like film or do something with. And so just kind of worked from there, and started the channel.
Well, I discovered just today actually about the Feynman method, like developed by Richard Feynman, and it's about you describe things to people and you try to make it a bit simpler so that anyone could understand it. And you keep
Yeah.
repeating that process, and that's the best way to learn, apparently. And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering, was there any synchronicity in you learning to do and how, what anything drawing you to learning to about to making films and then making films about this?
Well, um, yeah, I'm just trying to think. It's filmmaking's always just been something that I've always done, ever since I was a little kid, so I've always been drawn to it. And I certainly, as I've, gotten older and become more spiritual, my focus has been shifted from just making entertaining things to really looking deeply into what a story is and what how that could be used to help people, how that could be used to kind of help people process emotions or things that they're going through, because stories are very archetypal. They're very much you know the hero's journey, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that applies to everyone. So there's always a movie, yeah, a good movie, a good story really, speaks to you, right, at a fundamental deep level, and really has the power to change you. It really has the power to kind of awaken you, or at least like get you to think more deeply about who you are and what you're going through. Especially if you can identify with the character and what they're going through. So that's always been a big draw for me. And in terms of a synchronicity, I can't think of any one thing that kind of was like, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do, or this is something that I need to work on. It just kind of, you know, kind of gradually evolved and just became what it was.
Well, I mean, I guess that's another way it will happen. That was your
Sure.
hero's journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
that's what life is. I've got this idea that hero's journey is kind of like part of the software of this incarnation, and at least on
Hmm.
third density.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I think it's it's interesting when you look at the archetypes. I mean the when you study the cards, the tarot cards, and look into astrology, there's really a kind of a it is a hero's journey, in a sense. I mean, it's the magician is the first card, in the 22 arcana, and it's his, this, being's journey through kind of its own mind, and it ends at the choice, which is the turning point. Going to the next level, going to the next octave. So it's following that process of self-discovery, and then returning home, which is exactly what the circle of the hero's journey.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. It's all I do believe it's a fundamental blueprint that we all share, right? And it's all something that we all have a part of, and we all access, and we all act out these archetypes in certain ways in certain aspects of our life. Sometimes we resonate more with this, sometimes we resonate more with that. And it's just very interesting, when you can see the parallels between them.
So you mentioned densities and
Hmm.
octaves. Could you explain for anyone who doesn't know what they are or needs clarification what they are and
Yeah,
how they work?
sure. So according to the law of one material, the densities are, essentially you could somewhat consider them dimensions, I suppose. Kind of, I guess, areas of where experience can happen. So you have the first, I think it's about seven densities, and in the octave, and the octave is a collection of these densities, which equals eight. So you have the first density, which is considered mineral life, planets, things like that, things that are not, that have some form of energy, some form of life, but aren't necessarily, conscious. So, elements, minerals, things like that. The second density can be considered animal life. And so that's, trees, any kind of animal or fish, those types of things, rudimentary awareness. And then the third density, of course, is where we are, and that's self-awareness. That's like the density, the first density of where we learn how to be self-aware, basically. Fourth density and beyond is really where, the choices that you make in the third density, when you graduate, is where the quote unquote work happens, and that's where the rest of your evolution will take place. And so that those are the higher dimensions where, we have kind of a greater access to larger parts of our consciousness, kind of a greater, access to, let's just say, like a higher awareness. So that's kind of like where that happens, and that kind of goes beyond. So the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, and the sixth is the last density of where experience happens before you graduate to the seventh, which is a merger with, if you want to call it God or the one infinite intelligence, and then it restarts. And that's kind of, the next level. That's the great beyond, the big mystery, right, where even those in sixth density don't know what happens. So
So, yeah, so is the eighth density the first density of another octave, basically?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a, you look at like science, you talk about the Big Bang, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I do believe that there are strong parallels to that. So, the Big Bang is essentially the birth of another octave. So we, according to the raw material, we're in, there were many different octaves before this one. So you consider this to be
Before.
right before, right. So it's almost like in the movie The Matrix. There's, five Zions or something like that. So there are many different octaves before this one. There are many different experiments with different logi and different kinds of, archetypes that were experimented with. And
Huh.
this is the, it doesn't give a number, is infinite. So whatever, trillionth iteration of experience that we're in now, and that's where we are. So yeah, so it's not like a linear thing. It's, again, infinity. So it's somewhere in there. But yeah, I do believe that life goes on, forever, and it doesn't ever end.
Here's
So
a question. So I've got this idea that perhaps it's all fractal, right?
mhm.
So there's this, I mean, there's this principle, this hermetic principle of as below, so above, as above, so below. This idea that things repeat on every single level, and it goes and zooms in and zooms out infinitely, and it's more or less the same patterns repeating in different ways. And I'm wondering, is so if you get seven densities and then which make up an octave,
Hmm.
and then you get seven octaves, and maybe do you get seven octaves just to represent like different things just as different densities do? And it's so like which octave are we in? Like
Yeah.
not, yeah, I don't know if we can actually know that,
Yeah.
but
No, I don't
thought
think
that.
so either. Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the raw material talks about it. We're in third density, but within each density, they say there's an infinite amount of, I guess you could call them mini densities, or kind of like
Mm.
different experiences that we can have. And if you look at, I guess the evidence would be that, if you look at people, right? I mean, there's everyone has a different level of development. Everyone's in a different place. So you have some souls who are new and they're fresh from second density, so to speak, and they're very much it's not like you can identify who these people are or anything like that, but it is interesting because you know this is, I don't want to say less evolved, but the ones who are new to third density, they tend to not be as self-aware. There's a level of I guess you could call it kind of like certain aspects are just not quite as formed, or is not quite as refined. And then those in the late stage third density, obviously are very much more spiritual. They're very, very aware of who they are. They have a certain energy about them. There's a lightness about them, right? Those are the ones who are going to graduate and become, at least in the service to other path. The service to self path is different, but
Mm.
you call them saints or holy, or there's a radiance about them that's very different. And then of course you have everyone in between, right? So it is a spectrum. And it's not you saying you can't just put yourself in a box, because even those who are most evolved certainly have days where they're not as evolved, right? So
Yeah.
so it's all across the board. So but it is interesting.
Okay, so there's a number of things I'm aware of, and you could choose the order you talk about them in, because you mentioned polarity.
Hmm.
You mentioned, no, you haven't mentioned chakras yet, I don't think,
Hmm.
but I know they're related. Um, yeah, and there's also, so there's the two polarities. There's also when you haven't decided yet,
Right.
and then there's the unification of the two polarities, like up in seventh density. So
Right.
how would you get across how these things tie together?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, they do all tie together in a certain way. So when you're talking about the energy centers, the chakras, you know, there are certain resonances with different energies on each level. So the red ray is the bottom ray. That's really tied to survival. It's more of a kind of like if it's out of balance, your survival needs aren't being met, and that's your basic needs. Things like food, shelter, things like that, right? The second one is orange, and that's the second energy center. That really relates to power, so personal power. That's kind of how you feel about yourself and how you feel about others. More specifically, uh, not necessarily kind of group relationships, but it is talking about how you interact and how you see other people. And it's really just about how you see yourself. So if you see someone out of balance in this, it really is about self confidence and about how you feel, really about your own identity. The third ray is the yellow ray, and that's really about your role in group settings and your role kind of in the larger schema of relationships. So for example, if you're at a job, so your place in the pecking order of that and how you feel about that. So those who are imbalanced in that area really kind of let other people's opinions affect them. So that's where you would get a massive imbalance in that. So that would be kind of orange and yellow ray. your own self-confidence, but then also how you feel about your role within that environment. If that makes sense. Green, of course, is about love, and that's like the first density or first energy center of self-awareness. You can call it, you can kind of see that as the first inklings of an understanding that you're more than just the body, basically. And
Okay.
yeah.
But if someone comes to the conclusion
Hmm.
that they're more than just their body,
Hmm.
but they're not consistently in green ray,
Hmm.
um, you could say the consciousness is still in yellow ray, and yet
Right.
they might be aware of more.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the idea of what Rawl talks about is the, seeding your consciousness within a certain energy center or crystallizing that energy center. So for a long time, most of the things that happen at third density affect orange and yellow ray, and that's really where a bulk of the work happens in this density, and that's dealing with your own view of self, and then also how you're interacting with other people in group settings and society at large. So a large majority of what's called catalyst, and that's the events and things that happen to you, pretty much anything that happens to you is considered catalyst. So that is the thing that generates the emotional reaction, which I guess how to describe it. It's the thing that generates the emotional reaction, which determines where you are at any given moment. So if you have, again, if we go back to the work analogy, if you're, let's say that you're kind of in a low man on the totem pole at your job, right? And maybe you're getting, bad work and nobody's taking you seriously. That's that's a catalyst, right? And that's going to affect you, you know, and maybe cause you to that might cause you to desire control, right? Or desire some kind of control over the situation. That is considered an imbalance in the orange ray because desire for control over others or over situations is a great imbalance in that center. And that's how you, and if you're aware of this process, you can tell where you are on that energy spectrum, and you can kind of say, okay, well, I'm feeling the energy here, and my thoughts are being generated to you know think about these things such as power or control, right? And that's how you can tell, okay, so now if you're aware, you can say, okay, so there is an imbalance happening here, right? And it relates to my own personal feelings of myself. And you can say, okay, so now I need to work on discovering why it is that I'm feeling this way, why it is that this is happening.
So is that the first step? The first step is knowing
Yeah.
yourself, or to
Yes,
knowing yourself with regard to that catalyst.
exactly. And
And
I
then
think
you, right.
yeah, I think it was Crowley who said, know thyself, and so it's like you be pretty much just like use that emotional reaction, right, to kind of determine where you are. So I guess the first thing is like have an experience, or at least this is what I do, and this is how I, you know, grow, I guess, and this is my process is I have an experience, right? I actively seek an experience and I go out and experience that, and then I return to a meditative state. I have the experience that generates the catalyst. I have that reaction or emotional reaction, and then I step back, and then through meditation, through contemplation, writing, journaling, things like that, you discover the cause of that catalyst or why that experience happened to you, or why that emotion happened to you. It requires being brutally honest with yourself and figuring out where your gaps are, where where the just trying to think of the word, but where the reaction is
Adjustment.
coming from. Adjustment, yeah. It relates very much to psychology, Jungian psychology, and
Hmm.
really just just analyzing your own thought process. Really, is all it is.
So I guess
So
that's the tricky thing to do, isn't it? Because it can
yeah,
be scary to confront what needs to change. Because a
right,
lot of the time we might see in others what we don't want to see in ourselves, right?
exactly, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it was. yeah, Jung, who said, he talked about the shadow, right, and talked about if the things that we don't like in others is really what we don't like in ourselves, and that's very true, I believe, and because everyone's a mirror, right, and everyone's just kind
Right.
of holding up a mirror to you, and if you know use other people, and that's the major lesson in Yellow Ray, and that third chakra is you know understanding that everyone's a mirror, and that what the purpose of interacting with someone is to really kind of know more about yourself and to learn more about what it is that's going on in your own head. Because if we didn't have these other people, then we would just be you know we wouldn't be able to grow, really. It would be impossible, I think.
Yeah. Also, we're growing for a reason, and
Right.
it's for the sake of the universe, right?
Yeah,
Or
I believe
source,
so. Sure. Yeah, I
even
think
though we
that.
are source.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, yeah, exactly. So, the talk about how, prime creator, the one infinite intelligence is seeking novelty. It's seeking experience. It wants to, expand, right? And it wants to kind of, and we are the way it does that. And what we do, that's why free will is so important, is because it's it's about maximizing the amount of experience that we all can have.
What's the
So
link? What's the link between consciousness and free will?
the link between consciousness and free will. Well, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that the more free will you have, the greater your consciousness is, or the greater your awareness is.
Or is it more the other way around?
Well, the less free will you have, I think the less you are aware of yourself. I guess like the link is, or at least a way to kind of you know answer that is really looking at like you know in order to maximize the amount of options that you have in your life. I mean, you really need to you know develop a self-awareness. So those who are very reactional and who don't have a great level of self-awareness tend to be, like, I guess those who have a decreased amount of self-awareness, who aren't very self-aware, tend to be very reactional, and so everything triggers them, or at least the things that are very like I guess like yeah, I guess it's like impossible for them to kind of get over a certain catalyst that keeps appearing in their life because they aren't aware that it keeps happening. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah, I
so yeah,
definitely know. Like, but it's interesting because I kept on experiencing certain things, but I actually started noticing. So,
yeah, yeah. And if you notice, and it's like, okay, so why does this keep happening? And it's like, okay, well, maybe it's because I'm doing this, or maybe it's because I'm thinking this. You know what I mean? And then that kind of can help at least provide a way for you to increase your self-awareness. Thus you have more
right.
choice in the matter. You know what I
But
mean?
yeah,
And that's yeah.
but in Hero's Journey, right? There's this journey into the unknown, into
Hmm.
darkness, which might mean people look like they're getting worse before they actually get better. Is that,
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I
yeah.
mean, well, I mean, I think it's sometimes, yeah. I mean, so
It
like,
depends on the path, you mean?
it depends on the path, and depends on how much faith you have, how much you're willing to listen to your inner guidance, and how much you're willing to just kind of, act on your own accord or whatnot. So I think that the hero's journey is really the journey into ourselves, right? So the journey inward is very much a journey into darkness. I mean, you have to confront the worst parts of yourself in order to kind of release them, and that means going through the shadow work that Jung talks about. That means kind of like observing the dark side of your behavior and kind of really accepting that. And to open the heart is very much a process of uncovering and releasing traumas, and releasing this negative stuff that's occurred to all of us ever since childbirth. So it is a dark, scary process, and it is kind of going through into the unknown and getting uncomfortable, but the result is, of course, you know liberation. So it's absolutely worth it.
Hmm. So you mentioned 3, 6, and 9 in
Hmm.
your YouTube name. So what's that a reference to?
Yeah. Well, it's I guess it's a reference to I guess in numerology, right? So 369, three is it's really the divine number is what it is. So
What do they each mean, and what do they mean together?
well, so three is a kind of means like the spiritual realm, like the heavenly realm, and 69 is kind of a number that means progress, basically. So it's kind of like I guess the short answer is it's about knowing that you're guided by the divine and that you are progressing essentially, which is the essence of the channel that I'm trying to do, is kind of like spread awareness and trying to kind of inspire people so that they can move beyond their current limitations essentially.
Yeah, like I suppose it's looking forward to the future, but also looking back to the 80s.
Yeah. So the retro stuff is really just a personal aesthetic choice. I really like, it's kind of I thought it would be kind of neat to. This stuff is very much a lot of it's based on the law of one material and other
This was done in
channeled
the 80s,
texts.
right?
It was done in the 80s. Yeah, it wasn't, the reference wasn't necessarily for that reason, but it was I wanted to create a kind of mystique about it and a mystery element, if that makes sense. So I thought it'd be neat to kind of, because if you look at the law one material, it's very much it is mystery clad, right? So it's channeled. You don't know who these beings are. You don't know what's going on, and it's kind of
Yeah.
a yeah. I thought it would be neat to kind of explore that aesthetic a
So
bit.
there's something you haven't mentioned yet in your videos, and it's something definitely relevant to the Law of One.
Hmm.
And I was asked this by someone else actually. There's someone else I interviewed about mysticism because this is a form of mysticism, right?
Sure.
And they were mystic, but they're not into the Law of One and that sort of thing. So they
Hmm.
basically asked, why the aliens?
Why the aliens? Um,
From the perspective of someone who's new to it, they might
yeah,
ask that question.
yeah. So are you talking about like
But I
yeah,
suppose, how do you explain their aspect of that, the aliens and the
yeah,
aspect of it, how it fits
yeah.
into the
Is
mysticism, why it's necessary.
sure. Like why it ties in. Yeah, okay. I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So
I mean, I
yeah,
agree, but with
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I guess the law of one. I mean, I guess like Ra is how they describe themselves as a sixth density kind of intelligence, and I guess you can consider them extraterrestrial, but more like closer to angels, I suppose, or some kind of like higher evolved being. Um, but the alien component, I think that the people get obsessed with the alien component, and I think that that's not necessarily the important thing about it. I think it ties in, and it certainly is important, but I think that the law of one is really about spiritual development, and it's a very spiritual text. It's very much about you know progressing through the archetypes. We're learning about the energy centers. It's very profound, and the alien component, and I do think that that may have been by design. I think that a lot of people get into this through aliens, through research in UFOs and things like that. I know I certainly did years ago when I was very much into aliens and UFOs. I stumbled upon the Law of One, and that's how I found it. So I think that that's a very good avenue or vector right into this. But I
Ah,
think,
vector. Yeah.
yeah,
A friend of
yeah,
mine mentioned vectors as well. Like vectors that the source apparently has created, like, this is just their perspective. They said that, like,
yeah,
different vectors to shape reality or whatever.
yeah,
What a consciousness to explore.
yeah.
Uh, oh, you're agreeing with me about that? Like,
Oh,
ultimately,
sure, yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, vectors. Yeah. I guess in terms of what your friend was talking about, you're talking about like we are vectors, or I guess like what.
well, there's another way of thinking in time and space, and there's different timelines maybe and different
Sure.
ways to change result. If you're going to go to Earth and influence things,
Hmm.
if you're in Ra's position, you'd consider what trajectories through time different
Yeah.
things you say have.
Sure, I absolutely think that. I mean, they are in theory, they are who they say they are. They're beyond time, right? So they're kind of in a place that's outside of linear time. So they certainly would have the ability to see many different paths and who and what they say would influence this. And they even talk about that in somewhat. When they say like, well, we can't answer that because it's going to infringe on free will. It's like, okay, well, this means that they understand as positive beings they don't want to, they want to maximize free will, so they want to basically ensure that they're not stepping the boundaries, right? They're not stepping over anything that they shouldn't be talking about or that's going to affect something in the future. So they're very much aware of that. I do believe that, and I believe they chose Carla and the LL research folks for a reason, and they certainly, it was planned. And you know, I absolutely believe that. Sure.
Right. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so what's your opinion of Nikola Tesla?
What's my opinion on Nikola Tesla?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was, a brilliant man. He certainly was. I believe he's a wanderer. I think that he was too. It was unfortunate. I researched a bit of his life and studied him a little bit, and he's in, Ra talks about a law of one, but he's very, I think, believe he was very much a sixth density wanderer, someone very much like advanced spiritually, also very gifted intellectually, had basically was able to channel, energies from other dimensions and kind of get these ideas and bring these brilliant kinds of inventions out. But I think that he fell into the trap of just being too naive. And I think that because he was from this other place that was very much, not as corrupt as Earth,
Right.
he kind of was misguided in his own way, and he wasn't able to kind of, see the errors of his ways or kind of see that other people were taking advantage of him and this and that, and made some very poor decisions. I think that if he had a competent business partner, someone who could ground him, I think that's what he was missing. I think he was missing that partner, you know what I mean, or someone to.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because Edison would have been that person if it
Yeah,
wasn't for the fact that, in my opinion, he was service itself.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think there was definitely that, and I believe they did partner for a little bit, and they fell out. And yeah, I mean, a partner can also be a spouse, right? So a wife or something like that. And I think that, as far as I know, he did have some opportunities and to marry, but he decided to basically through poor decisions. I think he just
Well,
decided
his
not
spouse
to.
was a pigeon, I've heard.
Well, yeah, towards the end of his life, yeah, he had a couple of romances, or at least potential romances and suitors, I guess, or whatever you call it. But back in his early days and 20s and 30s and stuff like that. So yeah, so he did have some. Yeah, I think all he was missing was someone to kind of say, hey, stupid, don't do this. You know what I mean? Like, hey, come on,
Yeah,
let
yeah,
you
we
know.
all need that, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we all need that. And I think that those who are lucky to have that, and with those wanderers who are lucky to have that in that kind of setting,
Like Jesus, he had companions.
sure, absolutely, yeah. And Jesus was, well, I think Jesus was so I think like yeah, I guess like it's interesting you bring that up because it's like a wanderer, right? So it's like Jesus was a wanderer, sure, but he was absolutely, I guess, more than that in a sense because
Yeah,
he was like he was able to, you know, I guess if you look at the archetypes, right, the 22nd archetype or the 21st archetype is the great way of the spirit. And that's like, I guess you could consider that enlightenment, right?
right.
He went through all that and became enlightened
So
essentially.
did he
So
embody an archetype? Because I get the impression that there's a Christ consciousness is something in particular that he became. And maybe
yeah,
that was a certain path, a deliberate trajectory he took. Like, because now that I get the impression, or people are talking about the Christ consciousness as it's like an actual, like Christ is in all of us as we awaken, and that maybe that was his whole purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, he was someone who was able to um, allow, I guess, if you want to call it Christ, or call it God, or kind of infinite intelligence, to kind of work through him, and that's what the purpose of kind of balancing the chakras, balancing the energy centers, and going through the archetypes, and kind of or any kind of meditative spiritual practice is about, is ultimately, if you're on the service to other path, it's about you know allowing the divine to kind of work through you. And it's not about you kind of forget yourself and move on. It's about like you're in, or like or removing the ego or something like that. It's not really about that. It's about having the higher have command over the lower, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so that's like, I think that Jesus embodied that perfectly, and I think the Buddha did as well. And
But you mean
you
the
know
chakras, the higher chakras having command of the lower ones?
exactly, yeah. So and more, yeah, more, yeah, exactly. So having your own like Christ consciousness have command over the lower. So our ego is like the intermediary. It's like the in between thing,
It,
right?
where's the ego fit in with the chakras?
So the ego is like kind of a not really a great term, I guess, because it doesn't really make sense when you're using this kind of system, because it's like the ego is like, people consider the ego, it's like, oh well, it's your sense of self. Well, technically, like everything is like your sense of self. It's just
What if
like,
your
it's just
ego
what
is
you're
your
tuning into.
body, like your actual brain itself?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe the energy. Oh, that yeah. My impression is that there's an energy body, which is the chakras.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There's a
Yeah.
spirit body, which is like our soul, and then there's the pain body, which is psychological
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
trauma. And then
Sure.
there's, well, also there's, you haven't really explained service to self yet.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, services. I mean, yeah, I'm not aligned with that, so I don't know it too well in terms of like what they believe or anything like that. But I understand some of the basics of it. It's basically, um, I guess you can consider service to self versus service to other. Service to other is maximizing free will, and service to self is limiting free will, right? So, or maximizing your own free will at the expense of others, I guess, is the short answer of that.
Right.
And how that works or how that plays out is varied. There's service to selfers who enjoy murder, what I mean, or kind of conquest and stuff like that. There's service to selfers who
Right.
screw people over in business and this and that. So it's, you don't kill people, but they, hurt people in other ways. And
I'm of the opinion that there are certain civilizations that represent it more than others. Like, for example, in certain ways, the Romans and the Mongols, I would say that there's aspects of domination that clearly
yeah.
typify it. And maybe in a lot of our civilization, we've been conditioned to a certain um to accept submission, I
Hmm.
suppose. But that's getting into conspiracy theory territory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that we are certainly ruled by service of selfers. I mean, I think that's obvious. Um, and I think that in general, this is a service to self environment. It encourages that. Um, there's definitely at least the Western civilization
But
certainly
they're
does.
also, I would say they're also catalysts, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So in
Absolutely.
a
I mean,
way, they
yeah.
kind of help us.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, I say, like, this is the greatest learning experience that, souls can have. I mean, going incarnated into Earth at this time, it's like, that's why there's such high demand
Right.
to come here. And it's like, because this is a great way for you to, propel your evolution.
So what would you say to someone who says that it's a prison planet?
I would say that, I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at it. I mean, there is certainly a attempt by negative forces to kind of, make this a if you want to call it a prison or you want to call it kind of a farm or something like that. I do
Yeah.
believe that. I think that that is absolutely the case. You know, Orion, or Rawl talks about the Orion group and this and that. So that's certainly happening. And that, but that generates a lot of fear, right? I mean, it's, focusing on that and that alone is very much a win for them. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it's not the entire picture,
I mean,
is what I'm saying.
certainly, yes, you're right, but perhaps it might allow us to confront the fear we have within us already
Sure.
and overcome it. Because if you don't confront it, then it's in the shadow, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's people who all they and we talked earlier about like how the UFO conspiracy thought stuff is really a good channel into the raw material, and a lot of people find it through that. And but then it's people kind of get obsessed with the alien component, and they kind of get obsessed with the negative agenda component, and they go on these conspiracy theories, and which it's difficult to kind of get clear when you're just focusing solely on that. It's good to be aware of it and understand it and truly understand it, and but it's not helpful to constantly be thinking about it and doing tons and tons of research and this and that.
Right. So I'm under the impression that there's do's and don'ts when it comes to awakening and opening your heart and probably involving your shadow and how
Hmm.
to navigate that. And what advice did you have for people who seek to awaken or further awaken?
Yeah, I mean, the I guess the best advice I can give is don't go too hard too fast. I'd say so. Take it slow, kind of, like understand, like, work on yourself first before you start entering into the higher levels, because it can be very discombobulating, it can be very disorienting, and can lead to some very negative results if
What
you're
sort
not
of
careful.
results?
Well, I guess the extreme end would be insanity or kind of psychosis, if you kind of work with these higher energies a little too quickly. And I've certainly experienced not psychosis or insanity, but I've certainly had, you know, experiences which I prefer not to have
Yeah,
because I went too quickly.
same. I listened to like these tones for opening your third eye, what I hadn't
Right.
actually fully opened my heart, you know? So
Yeah, and that's the
yeah, I mean,
danger.
I feel like I don't know. I just feel like I have actually been on an accelerated path for the last year or so.
Hmm.
And Jesus, I mean, it could, I mean, maybe it's one of these things. I get the impression is that these different, if you take an accelerated path, like it's harder, but potentially you can pull it off, but it can backfire, right? So,
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on yeah, I mean, it depends on who you are. I mean, but like either way, like, so when I first started, getting into spirituality and stuff like that, I kind of, I don't want to say it's a trap, but I fell into the belief of, oh, I'm just going to open my third eye immediately and go into the crown and throat
yeah.
chakras. And so I did these intense meditations, and I certainly had a lot of interesting experiences, but it definitely attracted a lot of attention, and,
Oh,
and, and
you
from
mean
the
psychic
astral.
greetings?
Right, exactly. Psychic greetings, it attracted attention.
Does that mean like
It
hearing voices and things?
No, I didn't ever really hear voices, but I certainly had, negative energies, kind of, I guess you call them negative attacks, and, demonic forces and stuff like that. And I wasn't into demonic things or anything like that. I wasn't into black magic or anything, but I didn't understand protection. I didn't understand asking guides for help. I didn't understand anything about the archangels, or the Holy Spirit, and yeah, or my higher self or anything like that. I didn't understand any of that, and so I was very vulnerable because I didn't have that protection, and so I was activating these higher centers, and basically broadcasting to the astral world, "Hey, I'm here, and I'm an easy target. Come get me." And
Yeah, I can relate to that, man.
yeah, yeah, it's dangerous, very dangerous.
And there's another thing, which is, what do you think of spiritual bypassing?
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a term some people have used to people when if someone is like only focused on the light, they're like and refusing to acknowledge it's a sort of attitude towards the negative things that pay any attention on negative stuff
Hmm.
is corrupting and that but of having a very negative attitude towards people they identify as of the dark.
Yeah, I think so. I guess like just to summarize what you're saying, you so basically like people who just ignore the bad and go with the
They're
good.
like, there's pure light all the time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's certainly they're not really gonna propel themselves that way. I think that it's very much like again like you have to go through the shadow work. You have to confront your dark side. You just have to. You know, there's no way about it.
yeah,
It's all love and light doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Oh, I guess it does exist when you finally release the bad, but you know until you do, you know you're always going to fall back somehow. You're always going to have a blind spot, and that's going to be exploited, or it's going to be, you know, it's going to come up in certain ways until you deal with it. So yeah, especially if you get into this work as a wanderer, as like a higher, you know, as someone who's trying to become a, you know, an adept, you will be tested, and you're going to be tested by negative beings, and they're going to find those weak spots, and they're going to exploit that.
right.
And if you don't confront that part of yourself, it's like it's open season because they work in the dark, and in the dark is where they operate. And if you aren't aware of any of that stuff that's going on, it's just going to keep coming up. And yeah, yeah.
Okay, so healing is important, right? Because a lot of us have traumas from when we're young. How do we heal?
Well, it's you know, I mean, there's you know, it's there's a lot of ways. I guess it's all dependent on yourself, you know, and I guess ultimately how you heal is simply by, you know, acknowledging of what happened and understanding it and bringing it to light. So we all have hidden things and things that we're afraid to confront, and so healing is really just about working through it ultimately and accepting it. And if you have, in the key, it's like if you know, people can say, "Well, I've accepted this part," but then they get very defensive if you bring it up, or creates an emotional reaction in them.
But that's
You
your
know,
clue, right? That's how we
oh,
know.
exactly. So if you're not healed, if that keeps happening, you know what I mean? So a balance, if you like, I guess, you know, the law of one talks about like, you know, the fully balanced, you know, being, right? It's like if they won't have an emotional reaction to catalyst, it'll be very neutral to them. You know what I mean? So I think you look
Right.
at the Buddha or someone like that. I mean, they're very serene, and it's like nothing phases them. They're just happy. You know?
Yeah, suffering comes from attachment,
Hmm.
and the hero's journey is what a way of. So catalyst comes into play with the hero's journey, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, like, again, like anything is catalyst. So, you know, our conversation right now is catalyst, right? It's like
Right.
it's not negative or it's positive, but you know, it could be considered catalyst. So anything that happens to you is catalyst. And you know, the the hero's journey, right? So you know, you as the hero are kind of walking into the unknown, and you're going to be experiencing opponents, and you're going to be experiencing things that are going to cause reactions within you, and it's how you deal with those reactions and what they can teach you is really the key to kind of overcoming it.
Yeah, is studying Jung important as well to understand
Well,
like
I think it's helpful. I mean, I think he was very much a, you know, an advanced wanderer. You know, he very much a person who he, you know, he was onto something. You know, I mean, he knew what was going on, and he spoke in very much like Western, you know, scientific terms and stuff like that. And developed a very good system for understanding who you are and stuff like that. So it's unfortunate that he's not taken as seriously in the psychiatric community as he should be, I think. But he's very much. I think studying him is a challenge because he's very complicated, but he's also very insightful, and it ties really nicely to the raw material.
yeah, I
Which
think so too.
yeah,
It's funny because like I mean, while some people really don't like the idea of combining New Age ideas and psychology, I mean, to me, I just think this it works so well together.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's
Not that
very
Jung was a New Ager, that has to
right.
be stressed, but perhaps perhaps he didn't fully realize the full extent of the implications of his work. Because especially, have do you know about what he when he looked into Gnosticism?
I know a little bit about that.
Is isn't
Not a whole lot.
Gnosticism a bit like the Law of One?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It very much is. Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely 100% ties into that for sure.
Oh, there's something interesting that you talked about, and you were talking in one of your videos where you talked about the galaxy.
Hmm.
And as we get more conscious through many lifetimes, that we get closer to the black hole in the middle and that we're spiraling closer and closer. And stuff like that. That was
Hmm.
fascinating. And then if you
Yeah.
also consider, is there a link between that spiraling motion and DNA?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a link. So it's interesting when you look at, space and images of galaxies and stuff like that. There are different shapes and different galaxies of different shapes and different kind of formations. The most common, of course, is the spiral. But yeah, I wonder, I'm curious if like that's a clue to the different types of archetypes that are on different galaxies, and maybe that's a clue to
Huh.
understanding alien life and how that could form because and other galaxies. Because I do think that if you look at the spiral shape, it very much is the hero's journey, right? It's going in that circular formation and then going to the next spiral or the next rung in the spiral, which brings you closer to the center, and it's just kind of like that circular motion is very much the process of evolution.
Do you
And
think, so go on.
no, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
So the hero's journey, do you think, does it, do we continue with the hero's journey? Is it equivalence of the hero's journey that we have in fourth density and fifth and sixth? Or is it an
Um,
entirely different system?
yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I have no idea. I'd like to think that they relate somehow. I think that Raw does talk about like the law of one that certain archetypes I think do kind of come over. I think it was the Matrix of the Mind or one of them kind of carries over. But I don't know if the question was ever asked in the material that if like the uh, the archetypes kind of continue on. I imagine that there is some type of story or some type of well, you know what? Actually, if you think about it, because like if you understand what the archetypes is really it's the process of self awakening. So at the end of the archetypes is really like you're graduating to the next density. It's kind of like the story that's being told. And well, the story that's being told is like the magician, basically taps basically develops a greater understanding of their unconscious, eventually strengthening the etheric body, and then eventually kind of using that to kind of contact intelligent infinity. That's essentially the story that's being told, and the last card, of course, is the choice, where you choose to kind of go into the next octave or the next kind of like you go into the darkness where you don't know what's going to happen next. So that's it. That's kind of the story that's told, and but I don't know if that translates into the next density because the next density is about okay, now you've made your choice, and now the work begins.
But still,
Of
there's that principle of it all repeats. So maybe it
yeah,
does and it doesn't.
yeah, maybe yeah. It is really interesting to think about. Um, I think it's kind of impossible to know, but it is interesting to kind of speculate on what that could be.
Okay, so you mentioned the logos. Now, I'm aware in this is something Jung and also Nietzsche talk about is logos and eros. And then
Hmm.
there's also the principle of gender
Hmm.
hermetically in the universe. And so how do these things connect?
Well, I'm not sure about Eros, but I know Logos is at least in the gnosis, Gnostic tradition and the law of one, it essentially is the culmination of the octave. Basically, it's the source. So the logos, and again, there's like different sub logi, is what they call. So there's the logos of the universe, which you could consider God, and then there's the sub logos of that, which would be considered a galaxy, and then there's the solar system, which is a sub logos of that, and then on and so forth. And our sub logi is the higher self. That's our direct connection to source or God, is through that channel or through that being, I guess. So that's and I guess like how that ties in. Um, what was the other thing you said? So it was Eros, and then the last thing you said,
Well, gender.
gender, right? Okay, so yeah, so um, I guess like archetypally, gender, male female is action potential basically, or consciousness unconsciousness. So traditionally, and again, this is not at all saying that women are this way or men are this way. It's
Mhm.
there's we're all a spectrum. So the idea that the woman archetype is that which is like which is tapped by the male archetype. So if you look at the archetypal or the matrix of the mind, the potentiator of the mind, it's the high priestess is the potentiator of the mind, and the magician is the matrix of the mind. The
Oh,
matrix of the mind is tapping into its unconsciousness, and that's the female portion, the feminine portion, and to generate catalysts and to generate experience, basically, to know itself. So in order to know yourself, you have to tap into your feminine side, which is the unconsciousness part of who you are, if you're male or whatever,
okay. I remember you reminded me of the potentiator and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Um, could you remind me of or remind the listener of the potentiator and the other parts of that process, and maybe go into more depth?
sure. Yeah. So the matrix of the mind is I guess like are you just looking for broad kind of definitions or broad like overview of what they are? I
We'll
guess.
start with that, please.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So the matrix is considered. Well, I guess like specifically like the matrix of the mind. I mean, that's considered like your consciousness. That's just basically the arena where your mind exists,
Why is it a
essentially.
matrix?
Um, I guess it's considered like it's the environment. So I guess matrix relates to that. It's an environment where things can play out.
All
So
right.
yeah, if that makes sense. The potentiator of the mind, or the potentiator itself, is really the unconsciousness, and that's kind of the deeper portion of the mind. So that's there's a veil separating between consciousness and unconsciousness, and that the purpose of going through the archetypes is really the process of uncovering that veil, essentially. So the potentiator, and you consider the word potentiate, right? So potential, the potential
Mhm.
hidden within oneself. It's all unconscious.
So it helps bring it out.
Yeah, exactly. So the in magic, at least, it's the for initiation, hermetic initiation. It's the process of of you know of bringing the unconscious to a conscious state. Essentially, they're deepening that, or lowering the veil, so that you have access to the deep mind, or that unconsciousness, and you can bring that out, essentially. And that's the essence of magic, and the essence of all these hermetic, alchemy and things like that, is the process of and really any kind of spiritual practice is really the process of kind of lifting the veil to allow that to come out, to allow greater access to that.
So the adept of the light helps bring out their own darkness or for what's from the shadow and bring it to light so that they can integrate it in some way or work on it within the
Yeah,
work. But
yeah.
maybe the dark adept brings it out of other people in a vampiric way.
Sure, we can. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, we're all mirrors. We all are, just learning about ourselves, right, through interactions with other people. So, that certainly is possible.
Yeah, I'm not going to claim that's true. It's just an idea.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's the
It's interesting to think about.
potentiator that is a function that a process or an archetype or what is
It's
it?
it's 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 an archetype. It's a concept. It's not like a thing that you can just kind of like say, oh, this is it. You know what I mean? It's like, when you look at tarot specifically, the images all tell a story. They all kind of like explain what this is, and you can look at it as a process. I certainly do.
So
I
it's a
think,
card in tarot.
yeah, exactly, and it's called the High Priestess in certain tarot
So
decks.
the high priestess, give me, suppose there's a story. How would the potentiator play out in a story?
Um, well, I guess the story would be that the male attracts the female, and the female allows the male in. I don't know, so it's considered a romantic story, because it is very much a marriage between the two, and I guess that could be considered the sum of what the archetypes generally represent is that union between the male and female parts of yourself, the unconscious and conscious parts
Right.
of yourself. So that, I guess, the overarching story really it certainly is a love story. Um,
The mystic woman. Oh, it's about the anima, isn't it?
sure, yeah,
So the anima, it starts off with I can't remember. I know it ends up being Sophia at the top, but it develops from more. So would you like to explain the development of the anima?
well, that's I'm not too, yeah, I guess I probably wouldn't be great to
Okay,
explain
I'll do
that.
it then.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
basically these in man, there's the idea, the archetypal idea of a woman, and what they see in what they're attracted to in women will reflect their archetypal, the level of development that their archetypal idea of a woman, where it's at. And the same principle is with a woman. So if a woman, you know, so if a woman is earlier on in their development, like the second stage perhaps, what they'll see look for is maybe a bad guy, who's and the guy, if he might be looking for the sort of, he might actually find the femme fatale sort of archetype more attractive.
yeah,
But as then later on, there'll be a more mature woman who's a bit more intelligent and wiser that the man likes. But later on, it will be the full-on wise woman, not necessarily wise old woman. That doesn't mean he'll like a granny. Although, I mean, if that's his preference.
sure, sure,
Uh, um, but yeah, I mean, suddenly and then maybe Jesus is actually an archetype of like the most developed man.
sure,
So maybe like the mystic man might be what a woman with a well-developed animus might be attracted to. And I'm not going to claim that's true. This is just my perspective on it. And what maybe that fits into the potentiator and the high priestess in that the high priestess might be a bit more of a developed, not necessarily fully developed, but a bit more developed um female character archetypally. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
it does, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when you talk about Sophia, I mean, Sophia is like the female version of Jesus, I guess. It's
Mm.
considered the Holy Spirit, and in certain circles in Gnosticism.
Well, that already
Um,
clarified certain things. I didn't know that.
yeah,
I know she's a character in Gnosticism. I don't know much about
yeah, 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 yeah. He's very much um, are you talking about like Jesus's role in Gnosticism, or
Well, I
or
mean,
or
if you want to talk about that, go ahead.
oh sure, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess and Jesus in is was the very much a Gnostic, right? I mean, he I think the great difference between what modern Christianity is and what I think true Christianity is that people worship Jesus as a deity when in actuality Jesus was a man who just went through this process of transformation and you know did it effectively and you know and you know you can too, you know what I mean, so
Yeah.
you can be Jesus if you wanted to, you know, so
So
it's
he
not
led the way, leading by example.
exactly. He led the way, and there is if you read into Gnosticism and well, there's a great website called momtalk.net, and this the author is brilliant man. He distilled he does a research you know article on Gnosticism. It's like a series, and he kind of breaks down what he thinks through his studies and what this is and what um, you know, Jesus's role was, and essentially, you know, Jesus came to essentially, yeah, like you said, pave the way. He came to kind of open up the possibility or free us from this, like, what do they call it, demiurge, or you know, this the I guess you can consider it like the this like you know mechanical God, which is very deterministic and just kind of
Oh,
you know. So Jesus
I've
came.
that reminds me of yeah. There's this very much mechanistic. Mech, it's about technology and just following. Well, it's probably serves a self thing, I guess, but
Sure, yeah.
the
Yeah.
machine god. Oh god, that makes me think of 440K. Oh, never mind.
Warhammer 40K. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess yeah, it's yeah, well I mean a demiurge is, you know, like I guess is you know, you can consider it like a computer program that's gone corrupted. And it's like
right.
this
So
thing. Yeah.
a corrupted serves a self computer that rules humanity.
Right.
I no, we're not going to
Essentially.
go that way. No, no, no,
Right.
no, no, no.
Okay. Yeah, that's another topic. It's very much that's a big
That no, I
topic.
mean like humanity will not go that way. That's my
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
yeah.
mean they
Well,
want
yeah.
to, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things where like, you know, you just like the demiurge kind of was originally supposed to be kind of a good thing, and it's basically supposed to essentially the long and short of it is like it's a program or some kind of thing that essentially like manifests you know the instructions that are given to it, and its original purpose was to fashion the physical reality based on you know the workings of the divine, and then somehow along the way it got corrupted and taken over by some negative force and
And is that the Antichrist?
I think yeah I guess you could consider it the Antichrist. I'm not
No,
too
I mean,
sure.
is the Antichrist that which
Oh well
program?
sure yeah it's the opposite of
I'm
Christ. So
speculating.
yeah no I mean I think that's very much so
And then it
yeah
turns out it's just a hacker, you know.
right yeah exactly yeah it's just some kid you know messing around somehow you know genius figured out you know the computer code. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It is, but that's the guy. Yeah, if you check out montauk.net and he goes over this in depth, and it's very fascinating stuff.
We went on a bit of a tangent because we were talking about the
Yeah,
potentiator.
right. Yeah,
So
we're talking
the
about
fact,
archetypes.
see, the potentiator brings out unconscious content.
Right.
Then what's the next stage?
So the next stage is catalyst, and that's you know when if you think of the story, right? So the magician taps the potentiator gives the magician what it asked for in the form of catalyst. And Catalyst is called Isis Unveiled in Tarot, and at least the Egyptian Tarot deck, and that's the catalyst. It's the unconscious revealing itself, and you know you can consider if you look at this in the view of self development, it's like we manifest experiences. The potentiator gives us things in order to awaken us, basically.
So it
So
works with. So the no, you carry on.
yeah. So like the you know like I mean you can look at it as you know we go about our lives in a mostly unconscious state and um you know the potentiator is trying to wake us up so it's giving us things to kind of jolt our awareness and those things are called catalysts and the catalysts are the things that happen to us which generate experience which is the next card is the next you know category um So the catalyst and experience are kind of related because the catalyst generates experience, and the experience, you know, can be used to propel yourself forward if you want to.
Right. So you experience a catalyst, and then if you pay attention, learn the right lessons, or you learn certain lessons from that experience can then, yeah, move you forward. So what?
Raise, yeah, yeah,
Then,
moving forward. Yeah. So, well, then
oh wait,
you,
let's take a step back.
sure,
Let's talk about the hero's. Let's talk about these steps in terms of the hero's journey
okay,
and archetypes that come up
sure,
alongside
yeah,
it.
yeah, sure.
Although
So
I don't know how long you want to go.
no, that's fine. Yeah, I got some time. So,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I guess the hero's journey is hero has a calling, and goes on a journey, enters through trial and tribulation, ends up, discovering or making a choice, in order to kind of, um, well, I guess I'm trying to think like exactly what the hero's journey is step by step. So it's like the hero is in a state or in a kind of world in the beginning, and has a calling, answers that call, goes on that journey, and goes through trial and tribulation or challenges, and then at the end makes the choice, which leads him to the new understanding, and then he comes back home. That's
Okay.
essentially the
So he gets
circle.
the experience and then he makes a choice. Is there anything between that?
Yeah. So in well, so yes. So the in the context of the archetypes, it's much more about a spiritual understanding, and again, like the archetypes aren't like a one. Like what I'm saying is really my understanding of it. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily what it is. It's like our archetypes are very much a subjective thing. It's
Yeah, of
all
course. But
who you are.
I'd like to hear your
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
subjective
Yeah,
takes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just want to clarify that. So no, but yes, so I guess if you're trying to relate this to the hero's journey, right? So what you said is true. You have the experience, and then you wind up, with the what they call the two paths, or the transformation. So that's the idea of like, okay, so now you need to sharpen your chosen path, and so that'll be the trial and tribulation, right, that you go through. That's the um where the conflicts come up. That's where, like, okay, so now you're tested, now you meet this person, now you meet that person, right? So that's like, if you're trying to be service to other, you're always going to be tempted by service to self things. You're going to be tempted to use the resources of the deep mind to what they call prostitute the maiden. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to be tempted to kind of prostitute your own unconsciousness. You know what I mean? You're going to be tempted to use it in service to self ways. If you're, but if you're not careful, you could lead down that path.
But how, I mean,
Um,
how do you know what truly counts? Like, is it like, oh, you smoked a cigarette? No, no, you're no longer stands to others. I
no,
don't.
no, no. Well, I guess well, so I mean, it's difficult to say. It's all subjective to the person, and everything like that. I mean, I think there are clear, you know, distinctions between what is service to others and service to self. It's very much like you can just use the filter. Is this violating someone's free will, or is it expanding their
Hmm.
free will? You know what I mean? And so the two paths is like, okay, so now I'm at a crossroads. I've sharpened my awareness to a point where now I'm aware of, my unconsciousness. I'm aware of my deeper spiritual self. I understand who, I have access to these resources of the deep mind. You know what I
Are
mean? And
we
so,
given these choices by our spirit guides or higher self? These
yeah,
crossroads, and
I
then
think
we need
so.
to decide, and it's like our stories. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think it's through the process of living. I mean, if you are, I mean, it kind of is like, okay, so like if I have this gift of a higher awareness, right? I can see things that other people can't. I understand things that other people can't, right? I I may have psychic abilities. I don't know. You know, I could use these to my own advantage, or I could use them to help other people. You know what I mean? Or I could
Fundamentally.
fundamentally, I'm not saying necessarily that's the case, but you know, the access to the deep mind just opens up a range of possibilities that were unattainable before. And it relates to just being, you know, more spiritual. It relates to being more aware of who you are and having, like I said earlier, having a greater range of options
Here's a
and
question.
choices. Yeah,
Is there a possibility of self-centered motivations or the ego sneaking up on you and it'd be like,
yeah,
suppose you're like, you're trying to help others, serve others, right? And you're like, but suppose your ego starts puffing itself up as about the idea of saving people and helping people. Like,
sure, yeah, yeah.
whereas
That's
what if, and if looking, is it because you might look at the idea of going within and just filling up, loving yourself
right.
as serves self, but is it like, is loving yourself actually allowing yourself to open your heart so you automatically love others? And is actually going outwards first, trying to love others before you've actually sorted your own issues out,
Hmm.
actually more the self-centered thing to do? So is it like the opposite of what you'd think? Like, how do we navigate this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess just trying to understand what you're asking.
Okay,
So,
sorry, it's a bit vague,
yeah,
isn't
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, well, all of this is vague. Yeah, it's very hard to understand.
Okay, so basically, do we go, do we look to awaken, open our hearts? Do we, and to awaken and to serve others? Yeah, just to serve others. Do we look within, do the inner work, and just focus on loving ourselves and accepting ourselves for who we are? Or do we try to help people even though we still got inner work to do?
Well, yeah. So it's you. I think that helping your well, okay. So the law of one talks about, and I totally believe, you know, like I understand this to be, you know, at least for myself, the way it works is working on yourself is helping others. So what that means is going through the process of transformation absolutely is probably the single best way you can help other people, because helping other people in a superficial sense, you know, you can feed the homeless, you can give money, charities, that's certainly great, but the real help is in the metaphysical sense, and that's
Right.
and that's the work in becoming that channel for the divine. That's the most important thing you can do,
So
and
does that
that
mean, oh, pardon me, Karen,
yeah, that's fine.
does that mean doing what you love and doing the inner work?
That's I think that's part of it. You know, I again, it's, you know, what I guess doing what you love in the sense of like a job or some kind of hobby or something like that. I don't necessarily think so. I think
Oh,
it's all about, because I think again it's deeper than that. It's like the inner work is all that matters, and that's the process of transformation, and that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, what you do in the outer world, you know what I mean, is like as effective. What you're doing in the inner world is way more effective than what you're doing in the outer world. You know, it doesn't even matter what you're doing in the outer world. It really, it doesn't. It's
I
all what it has to
largely
decide.
agree with you,
Yeah.
but I feel like what emotion you feel internally,
Hmm.
at least at a certain stage, can be affected by what activity you're doing in a given moment. And if in moment from moment to moment you focus on doing what resonates and brings you love and joy, and I don't mean superficially, I mean like if you're doing like a labor of love, like maybe your frequency will be of a love, more of a love frequency, but then you can't do it all the time, can you? Because you actually want to confront the negativity. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
honestly do believe that it's a good idea to do what you love as opposed to just like for example, a hobby or occupation, but
Sure.
and to do the inner work because and so you
Yeah.
do raise a good point because doing the inner work may be more important, but it also raises a question of why am I even podcasting if I haven't finished the inner work? But I like doing this and I don't feel like I'm doing the wrong thing. So I don't know how to square that circle, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's both important. I mean, it absolutely is ideal to, um, you know, do what you love to do and also grow spiritually. I mean, that's like the winning combination. Most people have a career or they do something that's not necessarily aligned to their greater wants or desires or so it's certainly yeah, I don't know, it's definitely like a, a a tricky question, I guess. It's
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, I don't
But
know.
if you can't control it, if you've got outside circumstances that are just entirely negative, or at least on face value,
Sure.
then the answer is focus entirely within.
Yeah. Well, I think you should always focus. Not, I guess when I said, you know, focus all, like I guess the inner transforms the outer. So
Yeah, that's a good point, definitely.
yeah.
And that's
So
a hermetic
it's
principle too, right?
sure, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's very true. And I've seen it in my own life, and how you are internally determines everything on the outside. So people, I think, I think the first thing, if people want to grow and evolve, I mean, they should really just spend time within and spend time, even if it's just 20 minutes a day or something, just meditating and trying to figure out, you know, um, why catalysts are appearing and kind of, uncover all that junk and get deep. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
going to be the greater transformation versus focusing on, career or focusing on some work to do. Because when you transform the inner, and then the work comes, and that's when the fruits of the transformation really start to blossom. So that's not to say, like, I mean, in my own example, right? So I'm a filmmaker, and so obviously my focus is always on being a better filmmaker and learning techniques and things like that. And so that's what I love to do. But obviously I also, do the inner work too. And so that's something that, and it translates obviously with my YouTube channel. I'm able to kind of use my skills and talents to bring those understandings that I, from research and my own contemplation, I can kind of bring them out into an entertaining way for people to understand.
Do you ever
So
see, sorry, Karen,
yeah, no, that's fine.
do you ever see people's auras and stuff?
No, I've never really. I mean, I think, nah, I don't have those um, abilities, unfortunately.
Where are you in your, where do you where's your chakras? Like, where do you
Where
rest
do
your,
I primarily seat myself? It's hard to say. I mean, I feel like I have done a lot of work over the past couple of years on the lower chakras, which was a lot, going again, contemplation, meditation, and working through catalysts. But I still, work through that. So that's certainly, and I think that's something in third density, everyone will always be working through. Um, it's, yeah. So I guess like where do my consciousness resides? I mean, I think, I guess if I could do a determination, it's probably in blue, but I'm not. I'm not 100% sure because it fluctuates. It all depends.
Right.
Sometimes, yeah,
Okay, that makes sense because like people can go up and down where they're at based on what they're working on.
right,
So, I mean, I honestly do believe like I've gone up to at least, actually, I think I've activated them all before. But the thing is, it's how long you can actually last with that.
right,
Depends on your the level of development. So it's not as simple as, oh, I'm at this level, I'm at that level. It's
right,
like, where do you consistently sit? And you might go like on a holiday up to like crown check, be like,
right.
okay, but I need to go back now because whatever. That's an interesting metaphor, but
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I
no,
mean,
it's
Carla
very interesting.
Ruckart talks about opening your heart, and it's like you had to eventually you'll get to a stage where you're more used to where it's open more of the time than it's closed.
Right.
Um, but it takes practice to build it up like that. It's like a muscle, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Ah,
Absolutely.
man, I've years ago online, I was talking to someone and they're like, empathy's a muscle, you need to practice it.
Yeah.
And I scoffed at what they were saying, but they're right. They were right.
It is. It's
Yeah,
very easy to close off. It's very, I mean, sometimes that
especially yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Like when you
Yeah.
react the wrong well, I'm not saying the wrong way to catalyst, but if you react in a self-centered way to catalyst,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, man, it happens. It happens. I mean, it's all a process, and you're right. It's not as black and white. It's not like, oh, I'm on third ray and that's, or whatever. It's like you, I mean, first of all, like we're all third density. So
mm,
regardless of where you sit, you are third density, which means you're subject to the winds of change and all that stuff, the catalyst. Like you're going to be thrown about no matter what. Like, things are going to happen and sometimes it's random. You can't
yeah,
control everything. So that's that's just the fact. And some days you're going to be, primarily in yellow. Some days you're going to be primarily in green. It's all about that balance. And but once you open up the hard work is, at least in third density, is opening up the heart. And then
yeah,
once that heart is open, then as Raw talks about, the ability to springboard into the higher levels is only awaiting the will of the adept. So
right. What are the main traps? I think some people talk about soul traps. What are the main traps that get in the way, or what are the main mistakes you can make in like your path opening the heart?
yeah, well, I mean, I think that um, for this, so for
On
this
the
Yeah, I mean, for spiritual seekers, I guess the path of awakening, and there's a lot of traps. There's a lot of the new age is a trap. A lot of the law of attraction stuff is a trap. The book The Secret, all that stuff. I
Would
mean,
you say
that's
it
all.
depends how it's used? If people are doing it for selfish reasons, like
Well, yes, but there's a lot of misinformation too. There's a lot of things that are talked about, which are just completely malarkey and just very harmful, and don't even talk about the higher stuff. When you talk about the law of attraction, and a lot of people who are fixated on that, it's all about material things and circumventing reality, and or circumventing learning, and trying to basically use magic and whatnot to you know will something into existence, which is it's possible, but it's also dangerous because
that's kind of serves the self.
it's very
Yeah,
much that service itself. It's also like it's very naive because you know like there's a cost to everything, you know what I mean? And so like a lot of people fall into the trap of talk, basically wanting things, and maybe they may not be intentionally doing it, but they may be conjuring demons, or speaking to
yeah.
negative beings and
Or it
stuff
could be
like that.
simply that you want things so you don't get it because you want it too much, and you're like, I want it really
Exactly.
hard, then I'll get it, and then
Yeah.
you really don't get it.
Right. Right. You end up
Uh,
disappointed, and yeah, it's a huge trap, and that's like a big one that a lot of people fall for.
so you got
Um,
into it through conspiracy theories or maybe alien stuff, right? That's how you
yeah,
got. And I got
Yeah.
into it that way as well. But I mean, some people do get into it through the law of attraction. And for some people, it actually works out. Maybe it's just a stage for some people, you know?
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean, you can make
absolutely.
mistakes and actually end up okay.
Sure.
Like me and you, we played around with the third eye stuff
Right.
and maybe got burnt a bit, but we got through. But not everyone does.
Right. And that, yes, absolutely. And I've certainly know people who've, you know, gone insane, and because they went too high too quick.
How do you
And
know if you're sane? That's the real question.
yeah, it's like, I guess I'm speaking more towards the obvious thing, like they cannot function in reality. Um,
Yeah.
and they're very paranoid and they just get lost in delusions and things. So that's really
Oh man.
yeah, right,
Sorry, that sounds like what I have experienced, but I've also but I think you can get out of it.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sometimes it actually, I don't know, like sometimes a little bit of craziness can actually, because it gives you, you certainly confront your shadow that way.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to, I mean, I mean, if there's something that's been really, there's a blind spot or a vulnerable spot, right? And it's really a sore spot when there's mental health issues.
Hmm.
Um, it's such apparent, it can be so painful that there's a real incentive to work on it.
Yeah.
And if it is worked on, if you follow the clues that your spirit guides give you and stuff, although people in the mainstream would say believing in spirit guides is a sign of madness, but whatever.
Right.
follow,
Right.
follow the clues, you can actually unravel the maze or within, because fundamentally, maybe that's part of the journey for some people.
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, for me, I feel like going a little bit, I want to say a little bit insane, but like I certainly confronted my inner darkness, and there was a lot of I don't think I'm alone in this either. Like I think that mental health issues are part of the process.
Sure. Yeah, it's very much a part of it. I mean, yeah, I mean, we all have varying degrees of, instability. That's for sure. I mean, that's again, the chakras really relate to that. It's all about, the mind is a prism, you know what I mean, and it kind of like projects whatever is being filtered through. So the energy or light is moving through it, you know, connects to an energy center, and that is the if it's in balance,
Right.
then that those distortions
It's
become
catalyst.
apparent. It
Yeah,
is, yeah,
mental health difficulties are catalyst,
yeah,
and like everything is, like you said, and certainly it might be in a more intense catalyst, but like fundamentally,
yeah,
any catalyst that allows you to grow from it. So
yeah, definitely, absolutely. It's just unfortunate, there's certain. It's very difficult if you have certain mental illness to kind of, get out of that. Um, but
but maybe
it's
there was a choice. Maybe
sure,
before your life, you chose to have that difficulty.
yeah, I'd
So
believe that for sure, absolutely. I think yeah, it's all a choice ultimately. And it's certain wanderers. Yeah, I've heard wanderers. Some wanderers have very much a difficult time in third density, so there is certainly that component too, and some of that may translate into mental, issues, or imbalances and whatnot. But it is all a choice, and and but that's the risk of coming here. It's like that's why it's so dangerous and foolish in a way. I mean, this is the way of the fool. You know what I mean? It's like
but the
very
fall
much
is the beginning of the journey,
it
right?
is. It is. Yeah, it's the beginning and the end. So
And many fall characters are quite popular.
oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. And it's a very, spiritual concept. It's the idea of the way of the fool. It's like, you know, you come to this place of darkness where we don't know anything. We can't know what's going to happen. We literally are just walking blind. And people, if you come from a place where like everything and you can see all the steps, it's like, well, why would you want to go into this environment where you could just potentially just like, depolarize yourself, or like just get lost in this, guess it just get lost in, time basically. It's like, why would you do that? And well, the answer is because, not only because in the case of wanderers, it's because they want to help, in service to other, and help a dark environment become light, but also because it is very much useful for them to help themselves grow spiritually. Just it's like a it's under that pressure, you can become a diamond, so
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And by leading the way into the darkness, we're like a beacon for people to follow, I guess.
yeah, definitely. And that's the overwhelming purpose of, incarnating here as a wanderer. And that really is the reason.
It makes me think of Dark Souls, I think, because isn't there this thing where at the game Dark Souls where you see the shadows of people or like ghosts of people who previously done it?
Hmm. I'm not familiar with that.
I haven't played it, but
Yeah, that's
maybe
interesting.
you're not a gamer then.
I
But I mean,
game occasionally, but yeah.
these archetypes can prop up in a lot of unexpected areas because fundamentally it's all one, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
sure. And I mean, and there's clues everywhere, and that's what's great about living here. There's a great book called Bringers of the Dawn, which is a channeled text by a group called them calling themselves the Pleiadians, and they speak about how our reality is very interesting to them because there's a lot of hidden clues that speak to larger, deeper concepts. You can kind of make a metaphor for anything, which is very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find those channeled works fascinating, actually.
Yeah. So,
Um,
yeah, so some of them are good. I would avoid most of them, to be honest. But the Bringers of the Dawn is great. Law of One is great.
have you heard something about a work in miracles or something? A course in miracles.
Yeah, I've
I've
heard of
heard that's
that.
Jesus.
I don't know. I don't know. I've never read that one, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
There's a lot. I mean,
there's a lot of channelers on YouTube and stuff.
sure. Oh yeah, and I would have almost all of them. I wouldn't even
Really?
spend time thinking about. Yeah.
What's your reason for that?
Well, it's kind of going back to what you talked about the traps. You know what I mean? For spiritual people, people who are just getting waking up and stuff. It's like very naive to want to channel without proper preparation. Like because you have to.
Yeah,
You're an instrument, and that's what the law of one is. Like they talk about like tuning the instrument.
that's why I
You are.
stopped.
Oh, you channel before?
I tried
Yeah.
out of curiosity.
Mm,
It is that thing. It's just like you stop playing around with it.
right.
Um, but yeah, because I got an awareness of my own frequency,
Hmm.
basically, and I was like, well, I'm just going to be attracting the frequency that I'm at, and if I'm at a negative place, or if I'm not fully developed, that's what I'm going to get, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
so I would say if someone is going to channel in in any sense, maybe it's better to just focus on spirit guides and just ask spirit guides for guidance or an archangels instead of actually channeling per se.
Yeah. Definitely. I would avoid it unless you're like a pure channel. Like unless your life is like it's if you like for example like I feel like I've been led somewhat to channel. I mean, I definitely have an interest in it in some way, but I'm reluctant to start because I know that I'm not like at that balanced state yet, and like I know that it's very dangerous because you will attract certain energies that are not going to give you any good information or worse, like cause you very much harm or insanity
Right.
and things like that. So it's not you have to be like aligned to that, and it has to be very much like a process. The law of one stuff, the guys at LL Research, they talk about like they do train people to become channels, and it's very much a yeah, you should be in a group when you do it, and you should have a guide or a mentor.
Yeah.
It's not something that you should do by yourself. It's very 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 dangerous work. Um,
Yeah. I've heard that
careful
information.
work. Yeah.
It does. This kind of connects up to something else, which is because of this, because of the maybe the dark side of the New Age community, or at least these dangers or these risks. There are some people. in fundamentalist Christian communities who talk about the New Age community as entirely corrupt and of the dark, essentially. Now, I don't agree with that, but are you aware of this, and how would you what's your perspective on their perspective?
On the Christian's perspective,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you know there's certain elements of New Age which certainly are not healthy, but I don't think that I disagree with the Christians. I don't think, or those groups. I don't think that's
mm,
necessarily a negative thing. I think that there are again, like I think it's just people being naive. Like I think that a lot of New Agers are just very naive. They don't understand the concept. They're in tune with these energies, or they're curious and they want to get to know these things more, but they don't really understand the consequences of it. And I think that it leads to a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of harm, a lot of just bad things. And
yeah.
yeah, so they
Perhaps
just
there's
to be
another
careful.
way. I mean, technically you don't even need to be into the New Age stuff to actually awaken.
Right.
You could be a Christian and just pray a lot.
Yeah. Christian
Um,
mystics. Yeah.
yeah, as long as maybe the risk with Christianity is that some forms of it actively foster shame and fear
Yeah. That's a
and
big
guilt.
one.
But if you
Sure.
don't get into that aspect of it, and you're a Christian, like I can totally see how it could actually work out, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there's people who actually channel an archangel, or at least they claim to.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, it's a Christianity. Fundamentally, Christianity is a beautiful religion. It's absolutely fantastic.
it
It's
was just corrupted. I would
yeah.
say the way I put it is there was a Roman psyop.
Yeah, basically. I mean, you're not wrong. It was a process of, you know, basically power and control, and certain sects did not want the real thing to come out, and they wanted, because you can't control, like Gnosticism. You can't. That's like there's no one thing that makes Gnosticism like a thing. You know what I mean? Like you can't go to a Gnostic church. That doesn't really make any sense because it's all varied. It's all kind of like essentially Gnostics are channelers. You know what I mean? Like, and it was kind of like that period was very much like kind of what we're going through now. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah, I suppose so.
good stuff. There's also a lot of bad stuff that kind of came through. It was all over the place. And there were certain Gnostics who were brilliant and like were like speaking truth, like, and then there was others that were just nonsense and just, insane. So, I think at the time, and I don't know too much about the history, but from what I understand, like there was competing sects, and the what became the Catholic Church, we essentially like you know took over and uh, basically made it illegal to be a Gnostic and or this other Christian sect, and that became the dominant form. And then unfortunately they destroyed a lot of text and a lot of things, except for the Gospel of Thomas and whatnot, or the Nag Hammadi texts, which were found in, I believe, Egypt in the 40s. So yeah, I mean, it was just like a time period of great like confusion, I guess, and like and they wanted to make it like a centralized, controlled thing. So their intentions may have been, good in a sense, like at least like in their mind, but of course, like the motive was control, which is of course the service to self thing, and
Oh, that's
that's
something for us to consider because if
yeah,
they try to control it,
right.
they might try again.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean,
what do we do about that?
well, I mean,
They
thankfully things like the internet and yeah, I mean, today it would be a lot harder to do.
is it because more? No, carry on.
Yeah, well, it's just because we're all connected globally. I mean, look, you're in the United Kingdom, and I'm here in America, so we're talking. So it's very much you know, you know what I mean. It's very much
Yeah.
a much more connected. It's not as easy to hide nowadays, but it is also there is a disadvantage because since there's a lot of noise and misinformation out there, so it's easy to kind of get your thing kind of lost in the shuffle or discredited a lot easier. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, there's certainly a lot of catalysts, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, and there'll be more to come.
Yeah, and So what's your opinion of all this stuff about there's going to be like that the light rays coming down like from sun or cosmic light like is like got this transformational quality that's
Yeah.
helping us awaken or something? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I think too. Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. From what I understand, it's something called like an etheric tide.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like the center of the galaxy is a black hole, um, and again, like I don't know, there's no science behind this, but it's this like the idea is like these energy waves, etheric energy, which is emanating from the center of the galaxy. It takes 25,000 years to hit our particular area of the galaxy. And so, from what I understand, there's like different cycles, and every 25,000 years, it opens up basically. The opportunity opens up for people to kind of go into that next level of reality, the fourth density, to evolve. And that involves planetary changes, that involves, upheavals and this and that. And so, what's happening is that this energy is kind of coming at us from the center of the galaxy, and it's there's some predictions say that it's just going to be a etheric tide, which is much more gradual, and so over a period of several hundred years, we will emerge into that fourth density. And then there's some that suggest that it will be a tsunami, in which case the upheaval and changes will be rather drastic, and there'll be a lot more cataclysms and stuff like that, which would cause us to emerge much more quickly. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, personally, I think it's going to be a gradual change. It'll
Oh,
kind of happen over the next several hundred years, and then we'll merge into that fourth density. But
huh, well, I see it the other way
yeah.
around. I think,
Oh yeah. Okay.
or maybe I hope for that because
Yeah.
like with like certain things going on in the world, it's concerning, and
Sure.
there may be, well, certainly, I mean that's something to me to do and to work on because like that's maybe fear on some level, huh?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like I see the signs of dissent growing. Like I think there's so much catalyst going on. I don't think it's going to take several hundred years. I think it might take decades.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly possible. Yeah. It all depends. I mean, there definitely is like a lot of changes. I think that there's a lot of predictions. I'm skeptical, but I don't know, just because like there's back in the early 2000s and 90s and everything, there was like
Mm.
these huge predictions about 2012 and this and that, and then 2012 came and nothing really happened, and so you know maybe something did happen behind the scenes. I don't know, but it just felt like we were all expecting, like just certain periods of time we were all expecting, like, oh man, this is the year we're gonna see this massive cataclysm, or the end
Maybe
of the
we
world's going to
are,
happen.
in a sense. It's just more subtle than we expect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe if you
Maybe
look
it
at
is.
like social, political events and psychology, maybe it has been cataclysmic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things we can't see. I mean, we're all living our own world, so certain countries are worse than others. And certain people are worse, having worse experiences than other people.
I'll tell you what I think. I honestly believe the culture war started in 2012.
Yeah, yeah,
Because, I mean, I don't want to get into it too much, but I'm just gonna not taking a side, but I'm saying like, well, the whole Gamergate thing happened in 2014.
hmm
The one of the participants in that, Anita Sarkeesian, started her channel in 2012, I think, or at least started a lot of activity then.
mm,
Uh, and there's all sorts of other things that have been happening since 2012. That's just an intuitive idea I've come up with. Like, um,
hmm
so I think that it was a consciousness thing at first,
hmm
and a lot of people have said they awakened, or at least I know some people like Aaron Doughty, the YouTuber, has said that he awakened around 2012.
hmm
So yeah, I see it as like on one hand, it's like it's not going to happen immediately, but that won't mean necessarily it'll take hundreds of years. Maybe it depends on us.
Yeah, Yeah. I mean, it really does depend on us for sure. I mean, you know, they say like the increase in etheric energy would is either going to awaken us or destroy us. You know, it's either going to make us like insane, or at least like certain people insane, and or it's going to like enlighten us. You know what I mean? So we definitely see that. I mean, this is the greatest time in history for growth. I mean, you
Mm.
know, people are awakening left and right, and it's happening all over the world. And they're having wonderful, amazing experiences, psychic experiences, like enlightenment experiences, contact with energies, and all that stuff is happening right under our nose. And at the same time, you have some people who have nothing is happening, and they're just going about their day, and you know, being bored and this and that. Then you have other people who are going nuts, like increase in
Yeah.
mental illness, and they don't know what's going on, and so it's all over the board. That's just going to happen more rapidly. I definitely could see that. I mean, the next couple of decades for sure, that's going to happen more rapidly. But it's you know whether or not we're going to like destroy ourselves or have some kind of cataclysmic, you know, like social upheaval thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm skeptical on that, but um, yeah, I don't know. It's yet to be seen. I
Well,
hope I hope not. I think that would
we've
be
um we've covered a lot actually, and I feel
yeah,
like that was a good note to end it on.
sure, sure.
So
Yeah, man.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, it's been fun.
I mean, I'd be if you're interested, I could interview again at some point.
Sure, man. Yeah, yeah, definitely. This is great. Yeah, just figure out a time, man. Just reach out. The weekends are always great for me. Fridays are usually pretty good too. So, um, yeah, we'll just figure out a time.
All right. Well, listener, I hope you enjoyed it too, because yeah, I mean it was quite an interesting conversation. So have a nice time doing your inner work and everything, and bye for now.